Please be turning your Bibles with me this evening to the book of Ruth, of course. It is so good to be with you. David wrote a long time ago, I was glad when they said unto me, let us go into the house of the Lord. And for us to be able to worship God together and to think about the majestic and great Lord that we serve, that is a tremendous blessing. Thank you so much for being here. I know it's an encouragement to this congregation and an encouragement to me, but most of all, it glorifies God as we strive to grow together. The story of Ruth has been called by one writer like a diamond in the darkness of a time of departure from God. And you may wonder why. Ruth seems to be such a positive story, so we get the diamond part, but let's try to put it in its context this evening. What was going on around the story of Ruth? So I want to begin actually, now that you have your Bibles marked there in Ruth, let's go back to Judges, and let's think about the book of Judges for just a minute, because when you think about these two books, Judges on one hand and Ruth on the other, they seem polarized opposites. And yet, one of these stories is taking place in the context of the other story. And I suppose if the book of Judges was actually a movie, I'm pretty certain it wouldn't be PG. If you look at some of the darkness in that book showing us what it is to rebel against God, and once you start rejecting the Lord and rejecting His authority and His power, and we try to promote ourselves and assume our own power and our own authority, things get very dark quickly. And when we look at Judges, the second chapter, that well-known verse, but it's certainly worthy of our attention, Judges chapter 2, and in verse 7, the people served the Lord all the days of Joshua. And we just pause there for a minute and think about the kind of man Joshua was. And the faith and the conviction and the courage that he had, the serving spirit that he had, the humility that he demonstrated, working as an assistant to Moses. And Moses said, if you don't turn to the right hand and you don't turn to the left and you abide in my word, the Lord says, I'll be with you as I was with Moses. And at the end of Moses' life, he gives that just great speech toward the end of the book of Deuteronomy. We come into Joshua, and God reassures him as well. And so that's the man we're talking about. The people served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who survived Joshua, who had seen all the great work of the Lord which he had done for Israel. Then Joshua the son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died at the age of 110. Look at verse 10. All that generation also were gathered to their fathers, and there arose another generation after them, who did not know the Lord, nor yet the work which he had done for Israel. How important it is to teach our children and our grandchildren the way of the Lord, and to show them and to exemplify the way of the Lord before them. And so the old adage that we're always only one generation away from apostasy, that's very true. Doesn't have to be that way. The next generation can be loyal and faithful to the Lord. But we must teach and we must practice his way. And so that's the background. And as you read through Judges, without going into the gory details, there are events and actions and behaviors that are foreign to the sense of God's holiness. And why was that the case? Well, look at Judges 21 and verse 25. In Judges 21 and verse 25, and this is right before we get into the book of Ruth, in those days there was no king in Israel, and everyone did what was right in his own eyes. Does that sound kind of familiar to you? And you think about our own culture and our own time and our own society. Well, we are not unique in that way. This has happened many times before. And there's consequences for that kind of disobedience. Now, let's come to Ruth 1 and verse 1. Now it came about in the days when the judges governed that there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem in Judah went to sojourn in the land of Moab with his wife and his 2 sons. And the name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi, and the names of the 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion, Ephrathites of Bethlehem in Judah. Now they entered the land of Moab, and they remained there. Let's pause there for just a minute. Often when we think about the book of Ruth, you think, oh, I know that story about Ruth. I know all the characters in the story, and I know what the story is about. That's a love story. My wife loves the story of Ruth. And she keeps asking me, when am I going to be her Boaz? You know the story, or we think we know the story. Do we really know the story? Because I want to tell you tonight that the main character in this story is not Ruth, and is not Naomi, and is not Boaz. And you're wondering, Bruce, who is it? It's God. And if I don't get that, I miss this love story, because the real love story here is between God and his people. It is his unfailing and steadfast love, even when we may feel abandoned. Even when we feel he is far from us, we see the assurance of his presence. And so in a time of spiritual anarchy and rebellion, we read this great story of loyalty and faithfulness. There's a story within the story. Now, I understand you don't have this story without Ruth and without Naomi and without Boaz and some others. And I'm not saying they don't play an integral role in the narrative of this story. Certainly they do. We're going to be talking about them. But I just want us to understand what the story within the story that we have read so many times really is. And it's about the steadfast love of God. It's about the faithfulness of God to his people. And so while there is I suppose there is a romantic aspect to the story, when you think about the kind of love Boaz has for Ruth and the kind of loyalty she has to him, it's not merely about them. It goes far deeper, and we see someone working in them and through them, and that is the Lord. God, Jehovah, Yahweh, is the primary actor in this dramatic account. And what an intriguing and wonderful and profound story it is. Even in times of despair, even in times of loss, even in times of crisis, we see God's purpose. So we're going to read quite a bit out of the book of Ruth tonight. We're going to start here in chapter 1 and move through this story, and then we'll make some applications towards the end of our lesson. So let's just start in chapter 1. It begins with terrible tragedy. So let's look here in Ruth chapter 1. We had come down to about verse 2. Let's pick up in verse 3, and we begin to read about this tragedy. Then Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. And they took for themselves Moabite women as wives. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. And they lived there about 10 years. Then both Mahlon and Chilion also died, and the woman was bereft of her 2 children and her husband. Let's stop there for just a moment. We might not fully appreciate this. Maybe we do up to a point, but during this time, if you were a woman like Naomi and you're off in a foreign country, so you're away from your community, you're detached from your people, where you would have been the most comfortable because of the distress that was going on, and your husband dies, and then your sons die. There's not really a male provider there at all. And you're by yourself. And what we're going to read, and you have to understand from Naomi's standpoint, she's thinking, God's against me. The Lord's hand is turned against me. He's not for me, or this wouldn't be happening. And we've mentioned this, but I want to mention it again, that within our faith, there will be times when we're very disoriented and where we're scared and we are afraid and we're having all these kinds of questions about where do I stand with the Lord. And every faithful child of God goes through those moments. That does not mean you're unfaithful. The psalmist had those moments. David had those moments. The great prophets of God had those moments. John the Baptist had those moments. But Naomi was in that dark place. And so we pick up here thinking about that in verse 5, when both of her sons had died and she was bereft of her husband. Then she arose with her daughters-in-law, that she might return from the land of Moab. For she had heard in the land of Moab that the Lord had visited his people in giving them food. So she departed from the place where she was, and her two daughters-in-law with her, and they went on the way to return to the land of Judah. And Naomi said to her two daughters-in-law, Go return each of you to her mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me. Now catch that phrase. I hope the Lord treats you the way you've treated me. In verse 9, may the Lord grant that you may find rest, each in the house of her husband. And then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voice and wept. I would hasten to say, it's not that she has become an atheist or anything. She just thinks the Lord's hand has turned against her. But they're crying and they're mourning, and you can imagine the grief that they were all going through, having lost their husbands. Verse 10, and they said to her, No, but we will surely return with you to your people. But Naomi said, Return, my daughters. Why should you go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb, that they may be your husbands? Return, my daughters. Go, for I am too old to have a husband. And if I said I have hope, if I should even have a husband tonight and also bear sons, would you therefore wait until they are grown? Would you therefore refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, for it is harder for me than for you, for the hand of the Lord has gone forth against me. So you see where she is. She's struggling, but she's saying it doesn't make sense. The logical thing is for you to go back where you can find those who would protect you and provide for you. I'm going to go back to my people. Look at verse 14. And they lifted up their voices, and they wept again. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. Tonight, I want you in your mind to really allow yourself to see this unfolding. See Orpah weeping. And see Ruth holding on, clinging to her mother-in-law. She had such a great love for her. I'm sure she had learned a great deal about her God and her people, not only in what she had said, but the way she had lived. In verse 15, then she said, Behold, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and her gods. Return after your sister-in-law. But Ruth said, Do not urge me to leave you or to turn back from following you. For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. And your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. And where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. Thus may the Lord do to me, and worse, if anything but death parts you and me. In verse 18, finally, it seems to me Naomi kind of gives up, telling her to go back home. She stops doing that. Verse 18, and when she saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more to her, so she just gets quiet. I mean, she is determined. She is resolved. She has this deep love for her. She's not going to abandon her in this time of tragedy. Ruth's steadfast. Ruth loves loyally. But I want us to begin to see what's happening here. God is working through Ruth to bless Naomi. Now, Naomi hasn't fully come to that understanding. She thinks, well, the Lord's hand is turned against me. But while she's saying that, God providentially, through Ruth, is clinging to her. You see it? And so as we notice this text, and we think about what's happening, there is a sense in which God, through Ruth, was refusing to leave her. That beautiful language we hear at so many weddings, it's just powerful. There's something else about Naomi that we need to understand, and that is this. Ruth, what did Ruth know? Ruth knew if they go back to her homeland and they go back to her community, then she would worship the true God. She just knew that. Why did she just know that? Well, it didn't happen by accident. The reason she knew that, brethren, was because of Naomi's life. She knew of her faith in God. Oh, yes, she's struggling, but Ruth is still there. Notice that faithful love and devotion of Ruth to Naomi. What an impression she must have made on her. Let me ask you, do we have that? Are we making that kind of impression on other people? On the people that really know us, the people that care about us, perhaps that are not Christians, would they know this? That if I go with you, I know the God that you serve. Now let's dig in a little bit more here. As God's chosen nation, Israel was to be God's servant as light to the other nations. There are a number of passages in the Old Testament that make that clear. They were to be magnifying God. They were to be glorifying the Lord. And yet, it doesn't take you very long in the book of Judges to know that's not what's happening with Israel. God wanted them to be the means, and they were. We know it's through that lineage, through the messianic lineage runs through Abraham and through David, through the nation of Israel, to bless all the nations. And many, I would say most of the Jewish people, if not all at one time, did not have a full understanding. But as we come into the gospel, we learn this and we know this. And yet they were failing in many ways. In this story, which was set in this time of dark and terrible unfaithfulness to God, we see Ruth. Now hang in there with me. Ruth, who's a Moabitess. She's not Jewish. She's not an insider. Not right now. She's an outsider. So here's the outsider through which God is working to bless Naomi. Who's Naomi? She's supposed to be an insider. You see what's going on here? And I'll mention at the end of the lesson, and we referenced it yesterday, this is a classic case of divine reversal. Insiders are acting like outsiders. Outsiders acting like insiders. What's that about? That's about grace. That's about love. God can work through a variety of circumstances. And so Ruth becomes a member eventually of the community, largely because of the example of Naomi that was so powerful that even when Naomi was struggling, Ruth was being strong. Naomi was a righteous woman who had suffered great anguish. Think about her. She loses her husband. She loses both of her sons. Can you understand why she felt the way she did, at least initially? To such a point that as we go deeper, look at verse 20. She said to them, "Do not call me Naomi, call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went out full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why do you call me Naomi, since the Lord has witnessed against me, and the Almighty has afflicted me?" So Naomi returned, and with her Ruth the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law, who returned from the land of Moab, and they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. There's a whole lot in that verse 22. And so let's begin really seeing this. Here she's coming back home, and she's bringing her Moabitess daughter-in-law. All the men have died. She feels the Lord's hand has been turned against her. And then we read about the beginning of the barley harvest. And that leads us right into chapter 2. So there's a lot of tragedy here in chapter 1. But there's these glimmers of hope of God's grace. So let's go to chapter 2. So there's a lot of tragedy, but life is sustained in chapter 2. And you begin to see the paradigm shift. So come with me to chapter 2. Now Naomi had a kinsman of her husband, a man of great wealth, of the family of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. And Ruth, the Moabitess, said to Naomi, please let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain for one in whose sight I may find favor. And she said to her, go, my daughter. You know, there's a lot of skeptics today who talk about the God of the Old Testament and how he was a monster, and they'll pick a few incidents, but they don't read the context of the Scripture as a whole. They don't even look at the context in which those incidents and the history behind those incidents. There were things for hundreds of years that led up. For instance, when you talk about the Canaanites, I mean, you've got child sacrifice going on, just brutal idolatry and all kinds of things we could talk about. And you'll hear that the Old Testament God is some kind of xenophobic, terrible monster that showed no mercy. That's as far away, even from the Old Testament, as you could possibly be. And we talked about this in our study, our youth study Saturday evening. But you know, if you're going to be a critic of Christianity, if you're going to be a critic of Bible students and of the Word of God, read the book first. Read the book first, and then let's have a conversation about this. And keep it in its context. You may say you don't believe what the Christian believes, but at least know what it is the Christian is saying he believes or she believes when they read the Bible. This barley harvest, if you go back, and we're not going to go there right now, but you might write this down in your notes, Leviticus 19, 9, and 10, that barley harvest provided for those who were vulnerable, including the stranger. God in the Old Testament, yes, he provided for his people, but there was provision for the stranger, ladies and gentlemen. Does that sound like this God that's unloving? Now, did he have a special people that he was in covenant with? Yes. Idolatrous peoples? Yes. Did he pour judgment out on his own people on occasion? Yes, because he's a holy and a righteous God. But you see the grace of God here, even in that statement about the barley harvest when you go back to Leviticus 19, 9, and 10. And here's Ruth, and she's going to go take advantage of this. So as a result, Ruth is able to find provision for herself and Naomi. Now, what's God doing? He's still in his grace working through Ruth, and now we have Boaz. He's working through Ruth and Boaz. Look at Ruth chapter 2 and verse 4. Now behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem and said to the reapers, may the Lord be with you. And they said to him, may the Lord bless you. Now, it's wonderful, you know, and I'm sure you've heard sermons before, Boaz, the kinsman redeemer. One translation says the guardian redeemer, and how he might foreshadow of Christ and his redemption. But just look at the story here in verse 4. Remember what Naomi was saying. The Lord's hand is turned against me. Look at what Boaz is saying. May the Lord bless you. The Lord's working through Boaz. He's working through Ruth. Verse 5, then Boaz said to his servants who was in charge of the reapers, whose young woman is this? The servant in charge of the reapers replied, she is the young Moabite woman who returned with Naomi from the land of Moab. And she said, please let me glean and gather after the reapers among the sheaves. And thus she came and has remained from the morning until now. She has been sitting in the house for a little while. Then Boaz said to Ruth, listen carefully, my daughter. Do not go to glean in another field. Furthermore, do not go out from this one, but stay here with my maids. Let your eyes be on the field which they reap, and go after them. Indeed, I have commanded the servants not to touch you. When you are thirsty, go to the water jars and drink from the servants' draw. He's going to go on and on and on, abundantly making provision. Let me mention this quick point to you. Love doesn't just do the minimum. We say we love the Lord. But then we turn around and say, do I really need to come on Wednesday night and worship God? I mean, do I need to do that? Or do I really need to study His Word? Or do I need to show love to my brethren? Almost as if we're looking for we're looking for that bare minimum. Brethren, listen to me. That's a love issue. That's a love issue. Boaz was happy to do this. In verse 10, then she fell on her face. Now we're about to learn something else about Ruth, which we probably already know, and she's humble. Look at her humility. Then she fell on her face, bowing to the ground, and said to him, why have I found favor in your sight that you should take notice of me since I'm a foreigner? She knows her background. I mean, she knows the situation. She knows who she is. Keep reading with me. Boaz says, I know the story, Ruth. I know the kind of person you are and the character and the integrity that you have. All that you have done for your mother-in-law after the death of your husband has been fully reported to me, and how you left your father and your mother and the land of your birth and came to a people that you did not previously know. Listen to verse 12. May the Lord reward your work, under whose wings you have now come to seek refuge. She was walking in the shadow of the wings of the Lord, as the psalmist writes. I want you to see Boaz knows who's responsible for this. He knows who's working in this. He gives God the glory. Verse 13, then she said, I have found favor in your sight, my Lord, for you have comforted me, and indeed have spoken kindly to your maidservant, though I'm not like one of your maidservants. And at mealtime Boaz said to her, come here, that you may eat of the bread, and dip your piece of bread in the vinegar. So she sat beside the reapers, and he served her roasted grain, and she ate and was satisfied, and had some left. And when she rose to glean, Boaz commanded his servants, saying, let her glean even among the sheaves, and do not insult her. Also you shall purposely pull out for her some grain from the bundles, and leave it that she may glean, and do not rebuke her. Our Lord makes provision for us as well. Jesus, as the good shepherd, gives life and gives it more abundantly. Verse 17, so she gleaned in the field until evening, and then she beat out what she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley. And she took it up and went into the city, and her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned. And she also took it out and gave Naomi what she had left after she was satisfied. And her mother-in-law then said to her, where did you glean today? And where did you work? Now, I want you to watch this. She's about to make a serious pivot in this story. This is critical. She's thought the Lord's hand is against me. The Lord's hand is against me. And in a way, not realizing how he was using Ruth. But then Boaz comes on the scene, and the story starts coming together. Verse 20, Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, may he be blessed of the Lord, who has not withdrawn his kindness to the living and to the dead. And she starts talking about hope. Hope is back in her mind. God's blessing is back in her mind. Elimelech had been a worthy man. Boaz was in that lineage. Ruth's humility is striking. Boaz's integrity is impressive. But behind Boaz and behind Ruth was our Lord, was God. And now that leads us on. Come with me as we come on down into chapter 3. Look at chapter 3. The Redeemer is truly revealed now. Boaz, this guardian redeemer, this kinsman redeemer. And we come to chapter 3. And it's a beautiful scene. Verse 2, or verse 1, Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, My daughter, shall I not seek security for you, that it may be well with you? Now God's working through Naomi. Have you noticed God's working through everybody? None of these three characters in this story get excluded. I mean, he works through Ruth, he works through Boaz, and now he's working through Naomi. What a change she's made. Verse 2, Now is not Boaz our kinsman, with whose maids you were? Behold, he winnows barley at the threshing floor tonight. Wash yourself, therefore, and anoint yourself, and put on your best clothes, and go down to the threshing floor, and do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. And it shall be when he lies down that you shall notice the place where he lies, and you shall go and uncover his feet and lie down, and then he will tell you what you shall do. She said to her, All that you say I will do. And when she went down to the threshing floor and did according to all that her mother-in-law had commanded her, when Boaz had eaten and drunk, his heart was merry. He went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain, and she came secretly and uncovered his feet and lay down. It happened in the middle of the night that the man was startled and bent forward, and behold, a woman was lying at his feet. And he said, Who are you? And she answered, I am Ruth, your maid. Now listen to this language. So spread your covering over your maid, for you are a close relative, or you are a redeemer. Now I want to pause here again for just a moment. You're like, Bruce, you just sure do pause a lot. Okay. But I want you to hang with this story. There are those who tend to be skeptics, tend to be modernists, and tend to have a very low view of Scripture that try to turn this into some kind of immoral activity of fornication on Ruth's part. That is despicable. That is absurd. Her character was too high, his character's too high, and God would not endorse that kind of thing in this beautiful story. And what a shame it would be to take a story like this and look for something ungodly to insert into it to undermine a high view of Scripture. This story illustrates God's faithfulness. There are some that have argued when she went in her clothing, it could be that she just dressed her best. Others have said that there was a custom in which widows would wear a certain type of clothing, and now this clothing changed for her as if she's moving on. I don't know. It's worthy of our attention, but whatever it is, we know she is a godly and a pure woman, and we know that she is interested in humility in this man, which was even shocking to him. So Ruth did as Naomi requested. She's asking for a marital pledge from Boaz, which was in accordance with Levirate law. Look again at chapter 3 and verse 9. See that expression, spread your covering over your maid? That's very similar to the language of God's relationship with his people in Ezekiel chapter 16 and verse 8. That is very common Old Testament language for his fellowship and his communion and his protection. Boaz felt loved. Ruth respected him. Look at chapter 3 and verse 10. Then he said, May you be blessed of the Lord, my daughter. You have shown your last kindness to be better than the first by not going after young men, whether poor or rich. Now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for whatever you ask of all my people in the city know you to be a woman of excellence. But there's one issue here. Because he is a man of integrity, there's an issue here. Whoever the closest relative is. But there's a relative closer than Boaz. Can you imagine? I'm sure Naomi says, we're just going to have to see how this is going to work out. But Ruth's heart had to have been just pounding at this point. We see Boaz's integrity because he follows the letter of this tradition. He goes to the men of the city. He tells the man that's the closer relative. And to me, when I read that text, now some of you may say, Bruce, you missed it. So if I did, you can let me know all about it. But when I read that text, it seems like the man's kind of interested in the land until he finds out he's going to end up with a Moabitess. But nonetheless, he backs away from that. This opens things up, I think, by God's loving providence for Boaz. And you say, boy, Bruce, this is a wonderful love story between Boaz and Ruth. And you're right. But it's a greater love story between God and his people. And that's what I really want us to get out of this. I want us to go on to chapter 4 now with all of this movement in this direction, as it's building in this direction. We started out with tragedy striking, but now we're going to see healing, restoration coming to fruition. We've seen God's grace working through Naomi, working through Boaz, working through Ruth, providentially. Now come on to chapter 4 with me. And in verses 13 and 14. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. And he went into her, and the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. Then the women said to Naomi, Blessed is the Lord, who has not left you without a redeemer today. Listen, and may his name become famous in Israel. May he also be to you a restorer of life and a sustainer in your old age. Ladies and gentlemen, the God we serve is the great restorer. If we'll change our heart and come back to him and serve him and be faithful to him, he will be faithful to his promise. The idea of loving kindness, as it is used in Ruth, is used in many places in the Old Testament. That Hebrew word hesed, which means faithful love. We sing that song about faithful love, covenant faithfulness, God being true, God being loyal, and he's calling us into a covenant relationship with him. May he also be to you a restorer of life. Wonderful man. God's working through Boaz. Ruth, wonderful woman. Naomi, wonderful woman. God is working through all of this. For your daughter-in-law who loves you and is better to you than 7 sons has given birth to him. I had a lady come up to me one time after this sermon, and she said, I knew women were better than men. Well, okay. But look at how God worked through the one nobody would have expected. Not only a woman, she's not even a Jewish woman. She's a Moabitess woman. Verse 16, and every time I read this, this gets to me. Then Naomi took the child and laid him in her lap and became his nurse. The Naomi that lost her husband, the Naomi that lost her sons, the Naomi that thought God had turned his hand against her, but now is blessing the Lord and showing loving kindness. Verse 17, the neighbor women gave him a name, saying, a son has been born to Naomi. Now keep reading. So they named him Obed. That ought to ring a bell. He is the father of Jesse. Now the bells are really going off. The father of David. And so you thought the sermon was over, but it's not yet. Okay? There are 3 things I want us to take home with us as we've moved through that story. First of all, and we've touched on it, the Lord's faithfulness. And when times are, when things are going like I want them to go, it's a little easier to say, oh yeah. It's when they don't go like you'd like for them to go, to know that God is good at all times and God is faithful at all times. Ruth, as a book, portrays that love and that kindness and that loyalty and that faithfulness. And the ultimate declaration of that is in Jesus Christ our Lord. The ultimate confirmation and expression of the depth of God's love is when we see His Son in flesh, when we see the Word became flesh, when we see Him agonizing in Gethsemane, when we, through the Scripture, see Him suspended on that cross crying out, "Father, forgive them. They know not what they do." That's God's covenant faithfulness and His loving kindness. And then secondly, redemptive restoration comes through God's people. I know there's a personal aspect and a very individual aspect that nobody else can fulfill but me in my relationship with God, and the same is true of you. But I think, especially in our society, we can tend to try to so individualize our notion of our relationship with God that we neglect to see how powerful His community is. Always has been. We see that in Israel. We see it in the New Testament church over and over. To grow and to be what I need to be. Look, Ruth knew to go with Naomi was to surrender to God and be a part of her people. Look at chapter 2 again in verses 11 and 12. It was in the community of Israel that she found herself in the wings, under the wings of God, and enjoyed this refuge. Where did that happen, ladies and gentlemen? When she became a part of that community. She saw it from Boaz. She saw it in Naomi. She saw it in the providence of the Lord. And so I want to talk to you about the Lord's church from this standpoint, especially a local congregational family. Are we that community? Is God's fellowship among us? Are we a means of His refuge and His redemption and His restoration and His healing? I want to read you a piece. You may recognize it. It was written by Brother Wilson Adams, and it's entitled "In the Pew," The People in the Pew. And I think it perfectly illustrates what I'm trying to get to tonight. They are parents burdened because of their prodigal children. They are grandparents raising grandchildren because if they don't, who will? They are caregivers wondering if anyone understands. They are single parents facing double duty. They are brethren struggling with sin. They are smiling faces hoping to hide their anxiety and depression. They are a childless couple facing disappointment again. They are folks facing both cancer and fears. They are parents who have had to do the unthinkable, bury a child. They are parents who are struggling to raise a special needs child. They are brothers and sisters who have done everything they know to keep their marriage going. They are widows who sit down as one at a table for two. They are sisters who harbor the secret of being abused. They are step-parents who seem to be on the outside looking in. They are the lonely, the scared, the hurting, but they come. They come to the table to share their grief with the one who gave his all. They come to lift up their voice in song while brushing away a tear. They come to pray and connect with their only hope. They come to encourage someone else while hoping someone will encourage them. They come to hear the good news and hope to take something away that will heal the hurt. These are the people in the pew. Funny, they look a lot like you and me. For His sake we come. We need to be determined to be a Ruth, to be a Naomi, to be a Boaz. And we can. You can. You can be that servant of God with integrity and compassion and zeal. And we as a people can be a community that reflects the nature of God. And if we don't, who are we? And then the final thought of the evening is what a reversal of events and what a transformation. What do I learn from this? What should we learn from this? Here it is. Story of Ruth. The great love story between God and his people. It says to me, as I read the scripture, that God can transform emptiness into fullness. That he can transform mourning into joy, and death into life, and despair into hope, and brokenness into restoration, and alienation into fellowship, and pain into healing, and lostness into redemption, and anxiety into peace. And he can do abundantly above all that we ask or think. And the reason why we have the story of Ruth in a dark time, and the reason we need that story today in 2021 for sure, as we walk strongly in the grace of God, is to remember the Lord's steadfast, faithful love is unfailing. But he calls us to be loyal, to show fidelity, to be committed and devoted to reflect who he is through his people. You've listened very well. Thank you for your good attention tonight. I hope as we read Ruth or any other book in the Bible, our first question is, what do I learn about God? And I hope that when we read Ruth, perhaps we'll see more of our God in that beautiful story than we've seen before. If you're not a Christian, God is faithful. Will you come to him and obey him with all of your heart? Come now as together we stand and we sing.
I heard the voice of Jesus say, "Come unto me and rest. Lay down